who knows, Maui, Hawaii, you can listen to us live on iHeartRadio. This is Jim Riley. I'm here in Muskegon's Clear Channel studios with my friend and engineer, that legendary Oscar Osbo, and a very familiar face to just about everybody here in Muskegon, former Muskegon Chronicle editor and former sports editor, sports writer, Cindy Fairfield. And good morning, Cindy.
Good morning, Jim. Thank you for having me.
Well, glad to have you here. We've got an expert in a whole bunch of different levels. Actually, if I had thought about this in advance, we probably would have talked about the Olympics with you, but maybe we'll have you back before that's over. And at the 9 o'clock hour, we're going to have a repeat, not a total repeat, but a repeated guest, which I don't think we've ever done, but it's pertinent to the discussions that we're going to have today. Mackinac Center's Jack Spencer will be back with us at around 9 o'clock. And the theme of the show is going to be on transparency, governmental transparency, and really how much do we know before we make election decisions, before we vote, and how interested is our local government, be it at the county level, at the township or city level, or some of these unelected board levels, how interested are they in really providing us with the information and the tools that are necessary to vote? And I would say that my little research over this past week or so has been that they're not very interested at all in citizen input. And I find it interesting because the Muskegon County government, who is making very big-time decisions that will affect all of us, in some cases, for 40 years, those of us who will be around here in 40 years, they have as their mission statement, now this is the Muskegon County Board's mission statement, and that is Muskegon County government serves all of its citizens by promoting a high quality of life through the process of representation with the highest standard of conduct and service. And that's about as bland as I think you can get. And what's interesting about the mission statement, though, is that one of the newly elected county commissioners, this is almost 2 years ago, when the county got prepared to vote for this mission statement, said, well, shouldn't we put something in there to make sure that we are doing all these, this high quality of life through the process of representation and the highest standard of conduct and service? Shouldn't we also put in there something that says we're going to do it without being financially irresponsible? In other words, we're going to pay our bills. And that very quickly, like a tiny little fly, was swatted down by the vast majority of the commissioners who didn't want anybody talking about finances. So it's clear that some folks on some of our elected representatives are interested in transparency and interested in focusing on the issues that are troubling so that we can fix them. And as Winston Churchill, one of my favorite historical folks, has said, quote, criticism may not be agreeable, but it is necessary. It fulfills the same function as pain in the human body. It calls attention to an unhealthy state of things. And if there was any example of the exact opposite of mindset in the last 10 days, our Muskegon County Board of Commissioners came out and very clearly said that they are not interested in criticism, certainly not public criticism. And we'll talk about that in just a sec. I want to get the word out.
You love criticism, though, don't you?
I do. Yeah. And one of the reasons I love it is that I'm so used to receiving it that it doesn't really bother me much any longer.
Yeah, that's all thanks to me, I think, though.
Well, I assure you, you're not the only one. But I am used to getting criticism, and I don't have a problem getting criticism. And you get too much of it, I suppose. It'll get you down. Cindy, as editor, I'm sure you receive no criticism whatsoever.
Never any criticism, Jim. But, you're absolutely right. I think that's vital. We welcome it. I welcome it. I don't want to surround myself when I was editor and we were making decisions on, how we were going to approach stories or projects. I don't want a bunch of yes people around me. I want people who are going to challenge me because that makes me think, okay, I need to, this is something I haven't even thought about before, and certainly none of us have the answers. And so, it's very important, I think, at meetings, public meetings, I'm a big advocate of that we do have an opportunity to have public input. Now, we also need to have structure, certainly, because these meetings could go on forever, and you could have people going on forever and ever and ever. So there needs to be structure and rules, but I think it's very important that we give people an opportunity to speak.
And I would say that if you look at most of the cities, if not all the cities and the townships in Muskegon County, they operate on that same basis. If citizens have a question, they can ask it, and if they request an answer, they typically will get an answer, a public answer. But at the Muskegon County board level, every one of the long-time county commissioners who essentially have brought us to where we are today in Muskegon County, and those would be John Snyder, Marv Engel, Bob Skolnick, Lou Collins,
Don't criticize.
And the chairman,
Ken Mahoney.
They do not share your interest in citizen involvement. And I will give an example. In just a sec, I do want to say we are a show that is interested in receiving criticism and comments and the insights from our very intelligent listeners. So if you want to give us a call, 231-830-3109. Love to get you on the show. Every once in a while we get so involved we don't see the phone because it has a tiny little light on there, and we have been criticized for that, but we'll do our best to get you on the phone if you want to get talking about some of the issues. And I'll tell you the thing that got me really going happened about 10 days ago, and it was at a meeting, what was the specially called meeting of the Muskegon County Public Works Board, which is comprised primarily of county commissioners and the county drain commissioner and a couple of other people. And they were going to have a presentation on hydraulic fractioning, which is called, the slang for it is fracking. And certain folks find that that's an evil, awful, horrible thing that must be stopped, and other folks find it to be a tremendous way that we can increase the wealth in the community and increase the availability of naturally produced fuels, which, of course, is oil and gas and things of that sort. But this meeting, and it was a public meeting, and it was a mandated public meeting. In other words, any time that a majority of the county commissioners in this case meet, they must comply with the Open Meetings Act, which requires that they post the meeting within a certain period of time, and they allow the public to at least attend. And so it was clear that the commissioners really didn't want to have a public meeting, but they had just essentially they were sued by myself and attorney David Wells, who's running for a judge. He's done a wonderful job in trying to promote transparency for Muskegon County. But they were sued. The county was sued because they had clearly violated a Freedom of Information Act and Open Meetings Acts, and they just we don't have to go to court, thankfully. They folded. They're going to pay not only their attorneys, but they're going to pay our attorneys. They're going to pay the fees that were involved. They've agreed to provide the information.
Out of their pocket, or?
No, that's funny. That's a great question. No, it's going to come out of our pocket. It's not going to come out of the $40,000 a year that we provide that each county commissioner costs us. No, it will come out further out of our pockets. But nonetheless, they did. It does appear, at least in the short run, that they've at least learned that someone's looking at them, and if they do violate these laws, they will be called accountable. So they did have this meeting to talk about fracking, which was going to happen on county land at the county wastewater site. But
was it really going to happen, or were they just exploring what the process was in case later they decided to pursue this?
That's an excellent question, and I would say that without knowing the exact answer to that question, my experience has been that when the county gets to the point where they're going to have a public meeting, there have been incredibly detailed private meetings that have gone on beforehand. So I would assume, and it's purely an assumption, that something is in the works. And the reason I say that is this is the same way that they handled the wind farm out at the wastewater area. And again, I'm not suggesting it's right or wrong. I'm just suggesting that, and it certainly makes sense. You don't want to just bring people in, have a public meeting because we're thinking of, putting a water park, in downtown instead of the county building. You have to do some preparation.
Here's an idea.
Well, there we go. Who knows? When they start building the jail, who knows what will open up there. But anyway, we have this situation
water park for the prisoners
where they brought in an expert. Well, they say it's leaking. puking, so maybe they already have that. That's the jail.
True. I'll go to the bathroom. Let's go.
So who knows? Let's get back. We got to focus on this meeting that again really drew a tremendous number of people, more interested Muskegon citizens than I've seen at any meeting in my 3 years of attending these meetings, and to the point where it was really standing room only. And these folks initially got in, and when there was a very short period of time where they could speak, they said, they were unhappy because the meeting time had been changed numerous times. And then after two of them spoke, I believe it was the only attorney who sits on the board, and that is John Snyder, who's looking to be reelected come November. He said, this is not a meeting where public comment is going to be accepted. And the chairman of this particular meeting and the chairman of the Public Works Board, Marv Engel, also looking to be reelected in November, also said, yeah, that's true. We're not going to let you speak, nor are we going to answer any questions, which was very consistent with the way the county board has been since I've been following it. But I've never seen it presented in such an in-your-face manner to so many people. Typically, the one person will come up and make a comment and ask a question, and chairman of the county board, Ken Mahoney, will say, "Well, we don't answer questions," and that's that's just the way they've done things, and they've gotten away with it. Well, these folks were quite unhappy, and generally, it appeared to me that they were anti-fracking. Because they did want to ask questions, they did want to get some answers. And what made it odd to me was that the county board had brought in an expert from the state of Michigan. He was part of the regulatory team, and he was fully prepared and well prepared to make a presentation on the safeties and the history of fracking in Muskegon or in the state of Michigan, and to answer those people who were either pro, but in particular those who were against fracking. And he continuously would turn his head when he was the speaker up at the podium and address the folks in the peanut gallery, as I call it. And he was told by the I believe it was the Marv Engel, the board chairman, but he was told by someone on that august body, no, speak to us, not to the people out in the peanut gallery. And there was a little some noise and some complaints, and the fact when they found out they weren't going to be able to, the citizens were not going to be able to speak, and the chairman brought in an armed sheriff's guard who stood, arms folded, sternly looking at the group. I'm sure he was not happy to have been brought in there, and we were chastised like little children. There will be no questions. There will be no answers. There will be no discussion. And if you make any noise, we will have you escorted out of the building.
They must have known you were going to be there.
Maybe
figuring you were going to sue and take away their laptops.
Well, the laptops that we paid for. Yeah. There we go. Well, I don't know what was going on in their minds, but I certainly know what they said in the contempt. I would call it a pure, unadulterated contempt that they showed towards the citizens of Muskegon County. And this went on, and then there was one point where there was some discussion, and it got the assorted group there got some noise came out, and chairman of this Public Works Board, Marv Engel, waved his arm and said, "One more and you're out of here." Truly, folks, there's something stinky on the fourth floor of Muskegon County, because what we had was someone who was there to interact with the citizens, to answer questions. Mm-hmm. And I will read this. This is to me kind of an interesting a quote. This is from a governmental agency. Are we coming up on a break?
Yeah, but you go ahead.
Well, I'll just read this and you can mull it over, and we'll try to figure out who wrote this quote. It says, "Government should be participatory. Public engagement enhances the government's effectiveness and improves the quality of its decisions. Knowledge is widely dispersed in society, and public officials benefit from having access to that dispersed knowledge." And it goes on. I will just say before we break, our county board has got a heavy majority in the Democrat Party, and maybe we can. Someone will be able to guess where I got this quote. So we will be back after break.
Bad Boys Bail Bonds, open 24/7, 365 days a year. Agents statewide and nationwide. We do 10% bonds for less. Call toll-free 866-728-6400. And remember, if we can't get you out, you ain't getting out. Payment plans available. Call now, 866-728-6400. Classic Computer Sales and Service. They buy, sell, trade, repair, and upgrade. New custom-built computers, 3-year guarantee, excludes laptops. Or your computer tuned up with more memory, hard drive, or maybe a DVD burner installed for $49.95. Need cables, power supply, or get the computer built the way you want it. You can do it at Classic Computer in their new location, 1921 Apple Avenue, Suite B. Call 773-5957. Classic Computer with hometown quality service.
I'm running for Circuit Court Judge in the 14th Circuit for the state of Michigan. In my 35 years of practicing law, I have had the luxury of practicing in almost all areas of the law, including personal injury, labor, construction, negligence, malpractice, real estate, divorce, contracts, insurance, zoning, criminal, many areas of the law. If I'm elected circuit court judge, it is unlikely that I will encounter much of any issue as a judge that I have not already encountered and have experience with as an attorney practicing law. The uniqueness has to do with the breadth and scope of my practice and experience that I've had over the years. Much of it in circuit court, but also in other venues as well as in judicial venues.
Paid for by the committee to elect David Wells for Circuit Court Judge.
Make a run for the border. Taco Bell is waiting to cook for you. Delicious tacos, nachos, chalupas, gorditas, quesadillas, or try their famous grilled stuffed burrito for only $1.99. Make it a combo for only $3.49. Their large variety includes specialties, combos, supreme salads, and kids' meals. Taco Bell, the best fast food north of the border. So walk in or drive up. Visit all of the Taco Bells in West Michigan. Open Sunday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. Taco Bell's open Fridays and Saturdays from 10 a.m. until 1 a.m.
Well, you dadgum government, you sorry so-and-sos. You got your damn hands in every pocket of my clothes. Well, you dadgum.
And here we are back at Ion Muskegon. You know, it's bad enough that certain folks have got their hands in every pocket of our clothes. But once we find their hands in our pockets, they don't even want to let us talk about it. They say, hey, shut up and bend over and let us take out your moolah. Cindy, you had a comment that I am fearful might not be in complete agreement with my sentiment.
Well, your fears may be justified, but I am in agreement with you. Absolutely, there needs to be an opportunity at every single meeting for public input. And I know a lot of times you have to get on the agenda ahead of time if you know what you're going to comment on. And I know they have to have structure and things like that. This particular meeting, you paint the picture that the commissioners had contempt for the public. That might be a little stronger word than I would choose. And you can banter back with me on that as much as you want. But I don't think that these commissioners had any clandestine motives. I think they just mishandled the situation totally. And I'm thinking if they had a do-over, they never would have had the deputy come in there and look at these people. And perhaps, or if I had been on that board, and I'm sure they can do these kinds of things, is if you find a lightning rod issue where you all of a sudden get a big crowd there, and so there is a lot of interest in it, even if it is informational, and I think this was an informational meeting, that you plan to have a separate town hall meeting or something at a time when people can come at 5 o'clock or something and let them say what's on their mind. A lot of times people just want to vent too. They want to be heard. I think the worst injustice you can do to somebody is to ignore them.
I couldn't agree with you more. That's not what they did. The reason I use the term contempt is because, obviously, if this was a standalone event, contempt would certainly have been too strong a word. This is not a standalone instance. It is something that's been consistent for a long time, in particular when, as we've mentioned before, but I will mention because I think it's so important, the county currently is about 109 or perhaps significantly more than that, but about $109 million underwater on its employee pension and post-retirement benefits fund. 9.5 years ago, when these long-timers that I'd mentioned earlier were elected, there was a $3 million surplus in that fund. So it's clear that the decisions that the county has made, certainly are you better off today than you were 9.5 years ago question, could fairly easily be answered in a two-letter word. But when you lose trust and you lose faith in the decisions that have been made by the leaders, then you would think that perhaps those leaders would say, well, let's bring in the citizens as the quote that I had spoken of just before the break. But when 80% of county spending is tied to the union contracts, and there are only 10 union contracts, and when these elected county officials change the rules to eliminate committee meetings, which typically is when these new contracts, this enormous amount of spending that accounts for 80% of all the spending, when they abrogate, they cancel the committee meeting. They don't even publicly admit to that. And then when a full board meeting comes about, and they don't even tell in advance some of the county commissioners that they're going to be voting on 3-year union contracts that account for 80% of the spending, that's contempt for the citizens of Muskegon County. It's true, obvious contempt, and in this case, these contracts were agreed upon in order to violate Governor Snyder's dictates of prudent government. In other words, by having not spending, frankly, too much on union employee benefits, and when asked about that at the public meeting, they said, "Oh, we did this in order to comply with the governor." Matter of fact, it was the exact opposite. They raced these contracts in order to avoid the requirements, which will ultimately come back in lower revenue sharing to the county. And I can assure you that at some point when the county deems that it's not getting the amount of revenue sharing that it deems it ought to get, they will not tell you, and I would certainly hope that the Chronicle would go back and reference this. I certainly will on this show, but I would hope that the Chronicle would say, well, wait a minute, we're getting exactly what we asked for. The governor was very clear. If you get involved in the prudent governance and prudent cost sharing, your community, your county, your city, whatever, will get greater amounts of revenue sharing. That's right. And the contempt that was shown by us. But I want to go back to this this quote: "The government should be participatory. Knowledge is widely dispersed in society, and public officials benefit from having access to that dispersed knowledge." Well, the interesting thing is this is on the public meeting page of the President of the United States, Barack Obama's official website. So we have a Democrat president who believes that the citizen does bring value to the table, does bring experience and intellect and a different point of view, and yet we have a Democrat-dominated county board that has truly driven this county by certainly some financial measures off a cliff, and is now prepared as in the debates with the sheriff's candidates. Dean Rosser, I'm not sure he's happy he said this, but when someone asked, and by the way, this was a back and forth, which was very nice. Someone asked, "How are you going to pay for the jail?" And he said, "Oh, we're going to issue bonds." In other words, they're not going to go through a millage that would require the support of the citizens. They're just going to issue these bonds, which will be general obligation bonds, which at some point after the issuance we will have to vote. We'll be forced to vote for an increase in taxes. So again, contempt, I think perhaps I'll go to my thesaurus and see if I can come up with a more powerful word, because I think it's clear that that's the way they view us. And we will be back after this break. We'll have another gentleman who's very familiar, has contempt for a lot of this, Jack Spencer from the Mackinac Center.
Bad boys, what you want, what you want, what you gonna do when Sheriff John Brown come for you?
Call Bad Boys Bail Bonds. Open 24/7, 365 days a year. Agents statewide and nationwide. We do 10% bonds for less. Call toll free 866-728-6600. 6400. And remember, if we can't get you out, you ain't getting out. Payment plans available. Call now, 866-728-6400. Classic Computer Sales and Service. They buy, sell, trade, repair, and upgrade. New custom-built computers, 3-year guarantee, excludes laptops. Or your computer tuned up with more memory, hard drive, or maybe a DVD burner installed for $49.95. Need cables, power supply, or get the computer built the way you want it? You can do it at Classic Computer in their new location, 1921 Apple Avenue, Suite B. Call 773-5957. Classic Computer with hometown quality service.
I'm running for Circuit Court Judge in the 14th Circuit for the state of Michigan. I have been a neutral, that's the person in the center like a judge, circuit court case evaluator for 29 years. I have been trained and certified as a circuit court mediator for 11 years, and I am on the roster or panel in numerous courts throughout the state of Michigan where circuit court judges appoint me to be the mediator to attempt to resolve issues that are in litigation in circuit court. I've been doing that for 11 years now. Most of my work has been with the American Arbitration Association. So parties in a dispute will go to the American Arbitration Association and say, we have this matter that we want decided and we want to hire our own judge to make the decision in this case. I am one of those judges, and I have been doing this for 15 years.
Paid for by the committee to elect David Wells for Circuit Court Judge.
Make a run for the border. Taco Bell is waiting to cook for you. Delicious tacos, nachos, chalupas, gorditas, quesadillas, or try their famous grilled stuffed burrito for only $1.99. Make it a combo for only $3.49. Their large variety includes specialties, combos, supreme salads, and kids' meals. Taco Bell, the best fast food north of the border. So walk in or drive up. Visit all of the Taco Bells in West Michigan. Open Sunday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. Taco Bell's open Fridays and Saturdays from 10 a.m. until 1 a.m.
Well, you dadgum government, you sorry so-and-sos. You got your damn hands in every pocket of my clothes. Well, you
every pocket of our clothes here in Muskegon County have got some government fingers sticking in them. And we're trying to at least warn you before that happens. We're not necessarily against paying for the services that we'd like to have, but apparently there's some folks that think that we're just not smart enough and really don't deserve to know what's going on for our betterment. They just want to take it and run in silence. Well, this is Eye on Muskegon. I'm Jim Riley. And I've got Oscar Osbo, and I've got the Chronicles, the ex-editor at one point, not too long ago, of the Muskegon Chronicle, Cindy Fairfield. Good morning, Cindy.
Thank you.
And we've got on the telephone one of our old buddies from the Mackinac Center, who the institution that really is now driving almost all of the investigative journalism for the state of Michigan. Jack Spencer. Good morning, Jack.
Thanks, Jim.
You guys, you do a great job, and Jack in particular, I know you've been on this one issue about the SEIU, the union scam, to put their hands in the pockets of folks who are taking care of loved ones in their homes, and calling it union dues, and getting the full support of, sadly, the full support of the Democrat Party here in the state of Michigan, and now we have a judge, and we want to talk a little bit about that because we did talk about that last week, but we want to talk about it in the context of transparency. And Jack, if you could maybe fill us in, because I know you were kind of down last week when we were talking about the possibility of this initiative, which will be voted on in November. And maybe you can fill us in on the initiative and why you think it might very well pass, which you and I and others think would be a bad idea.
Well, I think with any reporter who's actually interested in what they're doing, whether it's Mackinac Center or any place else, if you care about it, what you really want is you want to make to be the eyes and ears of the public so that they're informed, and then they make the decision themselves. The problem, of course, is when you get the feeling that major portions of the public are simply not getting the information, and that they're going to end up voting for things or ignoring things that they shouldn't, and that they'll be sorry about later, or they'd be sorry about if they really knew all the facts.
And why is, I'm going to toss you some softballs here, but why do you think, matter of fact, before I ask that question, could you explain the initiative that will be voted on in November that you and I are referring to?
It would, it's called the, it's Keep Home Care Safe initiative.
Who could be against that?
And well, it's designed. You don't name any of these things. Keep our scam going or something like that. It doesn't. For some reason, I think that even the average fourth grader figures out that's not the way you label something. But what it is that this union found a little trick under Jennifer Granholm that allowed them to unionize people who are on the home help program in the state of Michigan, which allows people to take care of relatives at home instead of having the relatives be institutionalized, put into senior centers, etc.
So this is a good program, and it's been around a while.
The program's good. I don't know anybody who doesn't, agree with the program. But the union managed to get these people theoretically put in a union and collect dues from them. And that was done very much undercover, and it's a long story how it developed, and the fact that they used mechanisms and little loopholes in the law. Nonetheless, the legislature finally caught up with them a couple years ago, tried to defund part of the program, which they thought would then make the entire thing collapse. It didn't. With the help of the union put money into protecting what they had defunded. And so this year, they actually passed a law to end it. Well, faced with this scheme ending, and by the way, that's really, if this scheme ends, this particular affiliate union of the Service Employees International Union will collapse. They're totally dependent on this scam.
So that's the only thing that they do is this scam.
They have a few public sector, which look like those are legitimate unionizations, in facilities. Matter of fact, one was in Muskegon until those people voted to get out of it over the winter. But really, when you look at the numbers, if they don't have these home health, these people on this home help care program, I don't know how they could struggle on without that.
And this happened.
Their last resort was to try to put it in the Constitution.
Okay, and what happened here, though, and this is why I'm bringing it up in the context of the transparency discussion, and that is that people who received apparently a postcard was sent out to all of these Medicare or Medicaid people, or Medicare, I guess both, and most people did not realize that was in fact a ballot. It wasn't clear. Most people who I know myself, if I had gotten a postcard, from the SEIU, I wouldn't bother reading it. I'd throw it out, and then I might subsequently find myself in the radio talk show union having dues automatically taken out. And that's how the scammy part of it was put together. And of course, this could not have happened without the full support of the and I'm not pushing the Republican or Democrat here, but in this case it was the Democrat Granholm administration and the Democrats in the Michigan State House and Senate who not only supported it then, but for the most part support it even today. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, it's a little scary how dependent the Democrats apparently are on unions. It's become obvious that if we're going to really get back to where we have a real two-party system at some point, I think maybe the Dems are just going to have to get divorced from their dependency on it, because while I was there with Mer's newsletter covering the Capitol up close, it just seemed like so many of those union votes were just an automatic, for the Dems. And there were a few exceptions. Tim Melton was very, very much maverick. If you remember, he was the one on the some of the school stuff. But for the most part, it would be the Democrats walking into caucus, walking out and voting carte blanche. Boom, anything the unions want, they get.
And by the way, we will talk about some of the Republican outrages, and there are a fair number of those too. But in this case, this is one party driven primarily by one union. Well, what I wanted to get to was this. We now have, is it 5 or 6 initiatives that are going to be on the ballot in November?
I think there's 6.
Okay, and nobody needs to worry about the primary because this is November and there's going to be a lot of time to get the word out. But as you had told me earlier, that 5 of these issues really have the interest of business behind them. Their business will affect businesses here in the state of Michigan, and therefore they're going to put money behind advertising and voter information in order to get the word out. But there really isn't a constituency. There's nobody with deep pockets for these people who are already getting state aid. They've already got all of the challenges of trying to take care of a loved one within their home. You can imagine they're certainly not compensated. I would think probably not compensated enough for the tremendous effort that they put out. And this thing may fly because it's got this lovely little name, and the media is, at least to your way of thinking, is not really interested in presenting the information that's necessary for a voter to make an informed decision.
I think the news media itself has not kept up with this issue right from the beginning. I will go to bat for some reporters into the fact that they weren't allowed, just like everybody else, was not even allowed to know what was happening when it started. It was a couple years in before anyone even had any inkling of what had happened.
Now, why was that? Why did the news media, including the Mackinac Center and some of the other investigative groups, why did they get blindsided? How did that happen?
Because we have Michigan employment relations laws, which were developed with the idea in mind that people know that they're who employs them.
So these folks who were getting state help to take care of loved ones at home didn't figure they were employees.
No, I think they still don't.
Okay.
But the law, which is what you're asking me about, why didn't the news media find out about it, was because the laws were developed where the employees would group together. Let's say they work in a building. This is more the way the law was written. Employees who work in one factory. Some of them want to unionize, so they pass get some signatures together and ask to be unionized. The employer says, well, we don't want that. And then the Michigan Employment Relations Commission comes in and in the middle of it like a referee and holds an election. And there was no one ever wrote anything about publicizing that or posting that to the news media because the union, people are all in the same building. They're going to know what's going on. They're going to be actually meeting each other. They're going to actually know who their friends and so on are, who they work with, and there'll be postings on bulletin boards, etc.
And that makes perfect sense.
But this was the first election, unionization election in Michigan history that was done all around the state by mail. Which, by the way, if you think about that alone, Jim, that would have been a great thing for the Michigan Employment Relations Commission to have advertised. They should have said, look, we're doing something brand new we've never done before.
But yet they chose to keep it secret.
Oh, absolutely. And I suggest that when you have a statewide election and it manages to be kept secret, that doesn't happen by accident. I think you have to work to keep that secret.
Well, Jack, don't you think now that you have done several stories on this issue, because I have read them, obviously, but don't you think as we get closer to the election, the media will try to shed more light on what is going on and do a better job of informing the citizens?
I hope so. But there's a really funny situation here if you stop and think about it. You know, I can understand the media not being able to catch up with it that quickly. It was very confusing when it first broke into the news because there was a lawsuit involved. There was a similar case, the daycare. The same thing happened with the daycare. Only that was actually, believe it or not, that was actually much less than this, and it was actually the second one. This was actually the first one. The home health care one was the first situation. But so you had the lawsuit, which confused the issue, and you also, I believe, had to a large extent no one really noticing, because of the legal case was about whether these people were eligible to be public employees or not. No one was really focusing on, wait a minute, there was no transparency here. And I think if it had been presented, or that concept had gotten out to the news media at that time, they might have gotten their hackles up a little bit and said, hey, we were denied something, and gone after it.
Right.
Okay, but now we're at a position where it's understandable that the major medias here in our state missed it. Even the Mackinac Center missed it. You have, of course, been voluminous in your writings. I've called you twice, as a matter of fact, to congratulate you on really affecting some positive change by ending this scam. And then shortly thereafter, it rose again from the dead the most recent time, which was a judge's decision to keep it alive. But we now have a few months coming up before the November elections. Now, we have an excellent columnist who is, I guess he's a part-time columnist at this point, but for the Muskegon Chronicle, a gentleman named Steve Gunn, who wrote a very, I thought, excellent article about this issue. It was in the Chronicle, I believe, but at the very least I know it was on MLive. And but I'm not seeing any place news stories. It's one thing to have a column, but there aren't any news stories that are being picked up by the media, the newspaper here, and really, I doubt we're going to see. Well, we might see something in the Grand Rapids television areas. But are you catching any of that? Are you sensing that there's some interest in explaining? Because there might be a positive side to this too. You would think that those who support this, those who don't call it a scam, they would have cogent arguments as to why that this ought to continue on.
This is what I'm very concerned about. Number one is, as you said before, out of those 6 proposals, I think this is the one that, at the moment, is the last one on the list. The Same Business Coalition that's opposing the anti-right to work, so-called collective bargaining one, also opposes this one. But that other one about the collective bargaining and the right to work thing is going to get all the money right now, it looks like. So,
because that's the one that's going to hurt business, whereas if this program is enshrined in the state constitution, it will only hurt the little people, and the little people don't have any constituency.
Nobody to fight for them.
In theory, the Democrat Party used to say that we stand for the little people. Certainly in this instance, they're standing for the SEIU union. And not the little people. It just seems to me it's a story that even if you are leaning towards the left, you've got a whole bunch of folks doing a tremendous job taking the burden off the state, doing it at home, working essentially as small business entrepreneurs, and yet the media throughout the state has ignored it. Well, we're not going to.
And it's very, the dynamic that I'm concerned about here is that we find out about it, we tear it to little pieces as far as looking at what happens, and basically have to reconstruct the scam through information we got through FOIAs. And our position on this has become, when the issue comes up, the regular news media asks the Mackinac Center for a comment, and it asks the union for a comment. Instead of, in a normal situation, when the Mackinac Center, and I was not with them at the time, remember, blew the whistle on this in 2009, in a more normal situation, if the news media was intact instead of splintered, if it was doing its job instead of overworked and its attention elsewhere, the news media should have been the one doing the FOIAs. The news media should have been the one finding out about it. Instead, we've got what Mackinac Center says versus what the union says, and it's become a different dynamic. And I'm concerned about that dynamic continuing, because it's basically what I my feeling when reporters say, well, why should we take your word for it? My answer is, because you haven't bothered to find out for yourself.
Right. No, Jack, I do think that's one of the tragedies of what has happened in the news business. Clearly, the business model has been broken for some time for the newspaper industry. The advertising revenue doesn't bring in enough to support the heavy news investigative staffs that we used to have. And while, Jim will get frustrated, he goes to county commission meetings, and, real money is being discussed here. It's taxpayer money, and there may be two people sitting there who care about it. And certainly as a newspaper, we ran into that same issue where we were covering these meetings, but these weren't the things that were resonating with our readers. They wanted to, police news or whatever, something a little bit more sexy than government. And at any rate, the sadness, what you're speaking of, is very real. Newspapers have had to contract. They're giving more stories of what readers want, and they don't necessarily want these hard-hitting and very important investigative pieces. And so things like this are going to happen more and more. And as a former newspaper person, that makes me very sad, because once a public is fleeced, once they don't know the information out there, then that is when corruption and real pain comes into their lives.
Well, exactly, and as I said before, this is the thing, and I think it's true of any reporter who gets involved enough to really care, is it, no matter how much you feel about an issue one way or the other, if the voters are informed and they disagree with you, fine. But what drives you crazy is the idea that they just simply are being misled, and you can't seem to get the information in front of enough of their eyes. And
it's misled and kept in the dark. It's almost as pernicious not to know that there's an issue as there is to being misled. And I would just give perhaps a poor analogy, but one that I think is kind of appropriate. The Costa Concordia, the cruise ship that went onto the rocks recently, and of course the Titanic. There wasn't one single passenger on that ship that was interested in oceanic navigation up until the crunch hit. And while that might be boring, the facts are simple that in our country today, in our states, in our the local municipalities, maybe we ought to be a little more interested in the navigation side of it, because frankly, just as we're seeing in Europe, just as we're seeing in California and Pennsylvania and other states and cities and counties that are going bankrupt right now, just as anybody really ought to be able to see just across the street in Muskegon Heights, where we had a school system go bankrupt that everybody knew was on the rocks for years and years, that in fact the people that we are depending on, the captain of the Titanic, the captain of the Costa Concordia, those are the people that we've been compensating and giving them authority and power, and those are the people that we have been trusting for decades. And it's now turning out that in fact they've been having some kind of party on the bridge of those ships, because both of those ships sunk. And we have a situation here now where I would certainly hope that Cindy can use her connections and influence with the media here, where they would start saying, wait a minute, I know this is boring, but actually it isn't.
Well, you know what Cindy said is true, though. Have you ever seen the movie Wall-E? It was a DreamWorks thing. And you see where the planet's destroyed, and you see people in a spaceship driving around getting fat looking at TVs. I mean, that's kind of the way it's going. It's kind of a realistic type thing, because this is what people are doing. They don't care. They want to be entertained. They want to be entertained.
But the big question when I was editor, and we were transitioning into some other coverage and figuring out where we were going to use our resources. But the big question was, do you give readers what they want or what they need?
Yeah, because if you
I think you should force
don't
feed
address
everybody
what they want, they're going to turn off the paper.
Absolutely, but there are important things that they need that they may not know they need.
Right.
But that's when your society when things start happening in the dark because nobody is interested. That's when you really have problems, and I think we're starting to see a little bit more of that, and that's frightening.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna do our best here at Eye on Muskegon, and Jack, you guys just do a wonderful job. Thank you so much for fighting the good fight. Thanks for being on the show. We will be back at you, and we will be back with our listening audience right after this break.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Jack.
Make a run for the border. Taco Bell is waiting to cook for you. Delicious tacos, nachos, chalupas, gorditas, quesadillas, or try their famous grilled stuffed burrito for only $1.99. Make it a combo for only $3.49. Their large variety includes specialties, combos, supreme salads, and kids' meals. Taco Bell, the best fast food north of the border. So walk in or drive up. Visit all of the Taco Bells in West Michigan. Open Sunday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. Taco Bell's open Fridays and Saturdays from 10 a.m. until 1 a.m.
I'm running for Circuit Court Judge in the 14th Circuit for the state of Michigan. As a Circuit Court Judge, I would do my very best and promote not only maintaining the courts that we have and building up the fledgling ones that we have, but also developing a drug court in Muskegon. I think it's very important. It's going to take a Circuit Court Judge who is dedicated to this because it involves a lot of coordination with the prosecutor's office and the defender's office. You need grants and you need income for these specialized treatment programs.
Other judges that we have here in the county, they really bring not just temperament and great judgment and compassion, but they bring an array of experience. Seems to me that you have an awful lot of that already, and I wish you the best in the coming election.
Thank you. I hope the voters feel that way too on August 7th.
Paid for by the committee to elect David Wells for Circuit Court Judge. Classic Computer Sales and Service. They buy, sell, trade, repair, and upgrade. New custom-built computers, 3-year guarantee, excludes laptops. Or your computer tuned up with more memory, hard drive, or maybe a DVD burner installed for $49.95. Need cables, power supply, or get the computer built the way you want it? You can do it at Classic Computer in their new location, 1921 Apple Avenue, Suite B. Call 773-5957. Classic Computer with hometown quality service.
Bad boys, what you want, what you want, what you gonna do when Sheriff John Brown come for you?
Call Bad Boys Bail Bonds, open 24/7, 365 days a year. Agents statewide and nationwide. We do 10% bonds for less. Call toll free 866-728-6400. And remember, if we can't get you out, you ain't getting out. Payment plans available. Call now, 866-728-6400.
Well, you dadgum government, you sorry so-and-sos. You got your damn hands in every pocket of my clothes. Well, you dadgum.
That dadgum government. I'm here with Cindy Fairfield. This is Jim Riley at I Am Muskegon, Oscar Osbo. Cindy, have you heard this song before?
No, but it's very entertaining, I must say.
Well, it's a Roger Miller song, and I found it. The Honey Bunch and I were in New York, decades ago, and it was in the Tony Award-winning musical for that year, which I believe was probably in the 80s, of Big River.
Wow.
And who was the husband? John Goodman, the husband from Roseanne, who sang the song in a far filthier version. So anyway, I found that, and I wanted to have it as the song, but it was just too darn dirty to do. And a very good buddy of mine, Cal Howarth, out there up there near Fremont, was able to dig up the original by the original writer.
Wow, that is fantastic.
Oh, so Roger did write the song.
Roger did write it.
Right.
Oh yeah, yes, and and it was popularized. I don't think this song, I'd never heard Roger's version.
I never did either. Yeah.
This was a Big River was, when you win the best musical for the year, and Big River was a great play, a great musical. Well, okay, we are talking again about transparency, and off air we were talking about the media's challenge that they have, where should we provide? Well, here, Cindy, why don't you jump on that, because I thought it was a good point. Should they?
Well,
provide
I think reporters and editors over the past few years, as resources have contracted, are starting to ask the questions as we figure out the balance, or journalists figure out the balance for news. Do we give readers what they want, or do we give readers what they need?
And of course, that it involves, saying this is what you need involves a pretty high level of hubris. But I do know that it used to be, and I imagine it's the same thing, the one area that would get the most number of responses was when you would change a cartoon, from the list that you had on the cartoon page, or certainly sports.
Most of my phone calls would come if the puzzle answers were not there, or the puzzle was repeated. And, these are important things, obviously, for our readership. There's no doubt about it. But when you have $1 million budgets occurring and things like this, and there doesn't even seem to be a eyelash of interest. It's troubling.
Don't you think that's why the Chronicle has such a hard time right now as far as circulation? Because nobody really seems to care as much about the actual news. They just kind of want to hear the fluff, and they've got the internet and they've got their YouTube. And
well, there are so many cultural reasons, exactly, and I agree with you, Oscar, that they have other alternatives for news, but so many people, and it has to do with, I say, with the change in culture, because I think in our generation, or the folks that are over 40 anyway, we did read the newspaper, we did listen to the 6 o'clock news, we have heard of World War II. There was a recent, it might have been Leno or one of those shows where they were asking people simple questions what decade was World War II? They were asking people if they've ever heard of Adolf Hitler.
Right.
And of course, this was a separate group that hadn't. But these were, intelligent, attractive, seeming. They weren't morons. they seemed to know what was going on. They'd never even heard of Adolf Hitler, or couldn't even put World War II in the correct century. And, okay, that's going to happen. But we still have people who do vote, and they're interested in voting, and we need to give them the tools. I'll give you an example of something that I just saw this past week on M Live. And the headline is, Muskegon Norton Shores join forces for a chance at federal funding. And I don't recall the specific head, the details, which were very sketchy, but there was one sentence here that really struck me. It said, details on how the money could be used were unclear, but Myers, this is the gentleman from Norton Shores, but Myers said some possible uses are down payment assistance for low-income people and financing for low-income housing developments. Now, let's go back to the first part of that. Details on how the money could be used were unclear. And this article was somewhat of a cheerleading article, how great it is that we've got the city of Muskegon, the city of Norton Shores together trying to get some of that free money, some of that Obama stash. They don't even know what they're going to spend it on. This is the mentality that is driving the Titanic and the SS Muskegon County, and perhaps maybe the SS Muskegon and Norton Shores onto the rocks, that there's this bucket of free money out there, which, if you really give it any thought, I don't know, I think this is $300-some thousand. But in order to get the $300-some thousand, here's how it generally works. Somebody picks up the phone and calls China and says, hey, can we borrow $300,000? And they say, sure. And we borrow the money from China, and then once we get it, then the same person calls up a credit card company and says, hey, look, we want to get a whole bunch of credit cards, and we want to put the names of our children and grandchildren as the people that have to pay them back. And the credit card company, which would be the United States federal government, says, oh, yeah, sure, no problem. There is no free money out there. There is a disaster. We do have, the European Union, which I know I can't blame the Chronicle for making a big deal about the European Union, but it's in disaster. There are discussions now that many of these countries are absolutely unfixable, and they're going to do what the Soviet Union just did, about 15, 20 years ago, which was absolutely collapse. All of the pensions, all of the health care that they had, all of these wonderful schools that we were told about for years in the Soviet Union, they all shut down. There were absolutely no pensions. And, of course, we know one of the benefits to the United States of that was that we got a lot of very smart Russians and members of the old Soviet republics that had the wherewithal to come over here. But I do think that transparency and openness, and I'll go back to something that happened just this past week at another one of these Muskegon County meetings. The very highly regarded Muskegon Township the supervisor, I believe is the term, Dave Kieft, came to the meeting. Now, he typically will attend these meetings, as do many of the other township folks. But he got up and he did something that was very unique, and we've got his comments on eyeonmuskegon.com. The video is there. But he called out many of the Muskegon County commissioners and some of the other employees, at least one of the other employees of Muskegon County, because there was a big vote that the Chronicle very triumphantly headlined. There was a 6-2 vote for the Water Board to consolidate, or at least to sign a 40-year, now think about this, a 40-year contract with the city of Muskegon for water services. Now, I don't know if this is a good deal or a bad deal. The vote was 6-2. Dave Kieft, the Muskegon Township Supervisor, and County Commissioner Alan Jagger both voted no. Not a big deal, or at least in terms of, they took a vote and they were knowledgeable. But what Dave Kieft subsequently found out after that vote, that this 8-member board that Dave Kieft was the chairman of had a 4-member meeting, secret meeting, attended by the attorney, the lone attorney on the Muskegon County Board, John Snyder. So he knew that they didn't want to violate the Open Meetings Act. And those 4 had a secret meeting where they chose specifically not to have the chairman of the board, and they brought other people in who are not on the board for information. In other words, to plot and to plan this vote. Now, that's legal, I believe. Is it right? The fact that it's legal doesn't necessarily make it right.
Well, I would agree with that, Jim. I think what you're talking about is not unusual. We see it all the time. Certainly in the newspaper business, we see it all the time. And you try to get into meetings, and you understand they've had these small quorum meetings because you can meet with so many, and it's not considered a big meeting or a real meeting unless you have a certain number of people. But no, it's not right. If you have people on, you've got politicking going on quite a bit, where you have alliances made in secret with these types of things. But with something as important as the water issue, because you're right, you're talking about a 40-year contract here. This is a long-term type of thing. You really need to have some openness, and I don't understand why they can't meet openly, even if they don't agree, and get your differences out there, because that's where you really come to a great understanding about things, is when you have those types of give and takes.
Well, I think it's important to understand that when these leaders make these decisions, you must assume that they think that these are wise decisions. Why can they not communicate the benefits of the decision to those who are ultimately going to pay the price of these decisions? And my experience has always been that when you have someone who wants to get things done in secret, someone who does not want to take questions from the public, and most specifically does not want to answer those questions, that maybe there's something to hide. And I'll read one little comment from the article that was on the MLive deal, somewhat a laudatory comment about how wonderful that these communities got together. And this is Dave, I think it's Dave Warner, or John Warner, who is the head of Public Works in Muskegon County. And he said, quote, several factors, including the total water pumped, will go into the water rate, but he is hopeful it will decrease for some residents. Quote, I think it's safe to say at the very best it will be less, and at the very worst it will be neutral, Warner said. In other words, in terms of the cost to the citizens. So what he's saying is this 40-year, the best thing that he can say about this 40-year agreement, I mean, why the heck would anybody sign a 40-year anything? The best thing he can say is that at the best, some of the water charges will be less, and at the worst, it will be neutral. And that is his pledge, which, of course, I'm sure 36 years from now we'll be able to dig up and get him to write a check in the event it's not true. So, well, that's the way they think, folks. We'll come back and talk a little more about how we think right after this break.
Make a run for the border. Taco Bell is waiting to cook for you. Delicious tacos, nachos, chalupas, gorditas, quesadillas, or try their famous grilled stuffed burrito for only $1.99. Make it a combo for only $3.49. Their large variety includes specialties, combos, supreme, salads, and kids' meals. Taco Bell, the best fast food north of the border. So walk in or drive up. Visit all of the Taco Bells in West Michigan. Open Sunday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. Taco Bell's open Fridays and Saturdays from 10 a.m. until 1 a.m.
Olson's has been around since Tom's grandfather started it in 1885, selling pianos, organs, and sewing machines. And let's not forget about steamship tickets. After electricity, they've been known around the Muskegon area for their name brand appliances like LG and Whirlpool. Olson's at 881 Lincoln are open Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. and Saturday from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Olson's also has great flat screens, great prices, knowledgeable service techs, manufacturer warranty, local delivery, hauling away old appliances, and hookup. Need appliance repair? Call Olson's experienced and honest technicians for the best value in town. So call a local business that's been in Muskegon since before electricity. Olson's, a local name you can trust. 881 Laketon, open Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. and Saturday from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Or call 722-2458. Olson's.
I'm running for Circuit Court Judge in the 14th Circuit for the state of Michigan. For 15 years, I've been the judge of choice for parties who want to hire me to act as the judge and make a decision in their case. Not only have I been experienced as a judge, as an arbitrator, I have been the judge or arbitrator of choice of parties. They chose me because of my skills and talents. I doubt that any of my opponents in this race have any experience at all, either being a circuit court mediator or certainly an arbitrator. At least to my knowledge, I don't think they have any experience like that. So I believe I do have probably the broadest and most extensive experience for this job of any of the candidates running.
Experience really does matter, and it sounds to me like you bring an awful lot of that to the table.
Thank you.
Paid for by the committee to elect David Wells for Circuit Court Judge. Classic Computer Sales and Service. They buy, sell, trade, repair, and upgrade. New custom-built computers, 3-year guarantee, excludes laptops. Or your computer tuned up with more memory, hard drive, or maybe a DVD burner installed for $49.95. Need cables, power supply, or get the computer built the way you want it? You can do it at Classic Computer in their new location, 1921 Apple Avenue, Suite B. Call 773-5957. Classic Computer with hometown quality service.
Bad boys, what you want, what you want, what you gonna do when Sheriff John Brown come for you?
Call Bad Boys Bail Bonds, open 24/7, 365 days a year. Agents statewide and nationwide. We do 10% bonds for less. Call toll free 866-728-6400. And remember, if we can't get you out, you ain't getting out. Payment plans available. Call now, 866-728-6400.
Well, you dadgum government, you sorry so-and-sos. You got your damn hands in every pocket of my clothes. Well, you dad.
And we're back again. I am Muskegon, Cindy Fairfield, the legendary Oscar, and not so legendary Jim Riley, talking at you Sunday morning. We are talking about transparency in government and the things that we'd like to have more information. We'd like to know when we go to the polls how to vote. Cindy may take a little umbrage at this comment, but as a conservative and a reluctant Republican, but I am a Republican nonetheless. When the Chronicle would come out with its endorsements for candidates, they most typically would endorse incumbents, which, of course, in Muskegon tended to be members of the Democrat Party. But almost always, if you were a conservative or a Republican and you did not get endorsed, you could use that quite successfully as a positive because the Chronicle had an opinion, and that's fine. And I'm not so sure that we're even getting that any longer. And the reason I say that is that the Chronicle got together with Muskegon Community College and MLive. Of course, MLive is the Chronicle's part of MLive, which, by the way, great sites. If you're not going to mlive.com and looking at the Muskegon Chronicle stuff, you're missing out because they are covering a lot more than you might see in the paper.
They are, absolutely.
But Paula Holmes Greeley and other folks got together and put I thought, an extraordinarily well-presented debate from the three prosecutor candidates, which will be coming up in the August primary, and call it four sheriff candidates, one of whom just was allowed to introduce himself. He's not running in a primary. But the reason that this was critically important is that, for the most part, who will be our next county prosecutor and who will be our next county sheriff will be determined in the August primary, because there's essentially no opposition in the main election, the general election come November. But equally important, before I go to that, I just say that they did these debates, and they were in fact debate-y. They weren't some of the phony, baloney, boring things that you see with the presidents. But the Chronicle and MCC, they had great questions. They allowed interaction between them. I was quite impressed with the entire thing, and it was short. It started shortly after the stated time of 6:30, ended almost exactly at 7:30. I thought it was quite good. It was a little sad that if it was clear if you took away the supporters, family, and friends of all the candidates, that there would have been me sitting there essentially alone. But we did put it on Eye on Muskegon, which you can go to eyeonmuskegon.com and see our version. And I know that they, in a far more professional way, the way Oscar would do it, they did video it, and I imagine it's going to be on MCC TV. But this was what we really need. Those of us who are interested in doing the homework, you can go to websites and do homework, but you can see these folks in action, and you can get the sense of the presence. I thought it was, at least from my standpoint, the individuals all stood out very clearly, at least in terms of their, not intellect, but their presence in the room. But the Chronicle and the MCC chose not to do any type of debates for the 3 county commission seats that will be decided in the primary in August. Now, that's 1/3 of the 9 county commissioners who will determine, probably given the way that incumbents are reelected, probably be our county commissioners for 3 of the 9, 1/3 of the county commission districts for the next 10 years. And I was told essentially there wasn't enough time, which I, with all due respect, I think is bullpocky. I would say, without any information to back it up, but certainly history behind me, the Chronicle does not like to highlight challengers. It does like to support incumbents. And
I'm jumping in on you, Jim.
Okay, go for it. Go for it. I was trying to get you going there,
I know
kiddo.
You were trying to get me going there. I think, traditionally the Chronicle has not gotten involved in primary races because, you have these things going up to the general election. But certainly in the last election, we did a little bit because we had that same situation with Huizinga and Cooper and Ramirzma and all of these people going for this legislative seat in the primary, that we felt like that was the race, and so this was a time when we were going to highlight that particular. But traditionally we haven't. We focused on the general election, but what we're seeing, and I think what I'm really kind of a little bit astounded by now, is yes, these primaries are going to decide races to a large degree in Muskegon County. It won't be the general election. And so certainly I would hope there would be some kind of area, to maybe not a full-fledged debate, but maybe there's something else that the Chronicle could put together where you have this type of thing going. And when you look at incumbents, I'm going to go back to that. You're right. I think in the past you would have to do something fairly egregious for us not to endorse you as an incumbent. But it has happened, and I know under my watch, when I was on the editorial board for school boards, there were a few incumbents that we did not support. We supported somebody else because they brought better criteria or something that we thought would be more helpful to the schools there. So I feel your pain, but I'm going to kind of defend the Chronicle a little bit on that because generally they have focused on the general election. Hopefully they do. I think Paula Holmes Greeley is one of the most fair people that I have ever had the opportunity to work with. And I think she would try to work out some kind of system where there could be some kind of give and take, whether it's a few questions that are asked of each commissioner, not a full-fledged debate, but I suspect she would find some way to work with you.
Well, back in the OK, defending the Chronicle, also defending the OKBZ days.
You guys are ganging up on me.
No, I'm not talking about anything bad. The OKBZ days, back in the early days when we had the news every hour on the hour for 5 or 6 minutes, that was the big thing we used to do. I mean, it was a big thing when the election was going to happen. everybody of the whole news crew get together and talk about the whole, election and who was to be elected, and went through the whole night long until the election was completed, and to let everybody know who was the
You're
next
right.
county
That would be
commissioner.
great to have again.
We don't have that anymore. We don't have any news source like that anymore.
But things swing. See, that's when we talk about transparency. If you recall, back in the Nixon era, prior to, newspaper reporters were kind of in the pocket of a lot of things. I mean, we weren't reporting a lot. I mean, a lot of things were happening, and then this big Watergate uncover, and it kind of, we got real not paying attention. Then we got to the point where, oh my gosh, Watergate exploded, and then we started investigating everything. And I think that's how things tilt. You do look at Good Morning America; it's become very fluffy. It's not giving
except for the
news
Batman thing
junkies
with
the real news, and there's a vacuum out there, and it will swing the other way because people are going to realize that. And thank goodness.
Well, I would just like to reiterate that we are going to make important decisions that will be irrevocable after August 7th on who will be the county prosecutor, who will be the county sheriff. But we're also going to be making equally important and irrevocable decisions on 3 of the county commissioners. I don't know for sure what's in their heads.
I just don't know if you want to see who was on the phone here. We might.
Oh yeah, we got a phone call. Let's take the phone call.
Are you there?
Yes, I am. This is actually Joshua Eldon Brady, one of the candidates for District 6, one of the 3 commission districts that will be decided.
Well, good morning, Joshua.
Just wanted to a little bit more perspective. I looked on day after the filing deadline. There was a big article in the Chronicle talking about how interviews would be forthcoming, and we sit now 16 days before the election that's going to determine who holds District 3, 4, and 6. And, I've been contacted by a couple of local groups like the Chamber and a couple of unions for endorsements. I haven't got a call from a single media group that's doing candidate interviews. So it's not just that we're not getting open forums or debates, although there is a forum scheduled by the NAACP on Saturday the 28th, I believe it is.
Yes.
And I'm not sure what all districts are part of that forum. I know I got a letter for it, but none of our local media have done interviews yet.
And I think that's pretty typical. I'm not with the Chronicle anymore, but I think that is pretty typical. They don't do those for the primary. They generally do them for the general election.
But
for example, I haven't even been contacted, and I'm a candidate as well.
But you're not a candidate in the primary. That's the difference.
That's right.
And the reason that they do these interviews in the generals because it's the final vote. Well, now we have a situation where the final vote is here. I don't know what's going on in their minds. I'm not going to give them motivation, except for the fact that they do tend to like incumbents, and maybe these incumbents might not look so well when faced with somebody challenging that incumbent. But nonetheless, when we are making decisions in the good ship Muskegon, which is perhaps a few hundred yards away from an iceberg, and the only real major media that we have in the county has not even bothered to pick up the phone and communicate with us, that says, I think, it says far more about the Muskegon Chronicle, and again, I have great respect for the Chronicle, but it says a lot about them, and it says an awful lot about the citizens of Muskegon County that we just seem to sit back and let it happen.
It's going to create a really interesting situation come October, November, when they publish interviews with 3 unopposed commission candidates.
Right. Right, yeah. You're right. And hopefully they will consider that and rethink that. I know Paula Holmes is a very fair person, and maybe somebody just needs to call her attention to that.
Well, we got Cindy on our side now. We've, she started out, she was going after me, but now we've won her over. Joshua, thank you for the call, and
you're welcome.
Keep it up. And good luck.
Thank you. You too.
Well, we are running, let's see, what's our time here?
About 3 minutes.
Oh, we got about just a few minutes to wrap up. Well, Cindy, you've got the insider's view And I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And I agree with you. I've found nothing but fairness and honesty with the Paula Holmes Greeley and frankly everybody that I've interacted. Eric Gertner, I think, does as good a job as perhaps he could. I'd like to see Eric made a senior vice president of information and give him far more space and at least as far as local government's concerned. But it truly is up to us. It's up to the people who are listening to this show and those who are aware of our mission, my mission, Oscar's, and I think Cindy's, and most of the people, certainly like Jack Spencer, who have said that we care about our communities. And the natural inclination of the leaders to do things in secret because it's more efficient has got to be overcome, because more often than not it isn't more efficient. You can be sure that the good ship Detroit had the leaders there had that exact same mindset. Again, how the Chronicle and how the rest of us in the Democrat Party and the Republican Party would allow the school system in Muskegon Heights to do what it did to the children and the parents and the taxpayers of Muskegon Heights for decades. I think is an indictment of all of us. And I was one of them. I didn't make any stink either. So, well,
we did try to make a stink on that, but I will be honest with you. Every time we got audits and we reported things, and we continued to do the best that we could with the information that we were able to procure. But quite often, officials there would pull the race card out at us and say this was a racist thing, and it was not a racist thing. It was a fiscal thing, and it was the same type of detailed reporting that we would have done with any school in trouble.
Well, we need to stand taller. We need all to do better. We need to get the word out. And again, Cindy Fairfield, candidate for county clerk, and of course you don't have to worry about August, but we'll talk with you on that later on. And Oscar, just a couple of final wrap-up things. Don't forget, we do post the entire Eye on Muskegon show on eyeonmuskegon.com on Sunday afternoons. And I'm on the Talkin' Muskegon show, a great morning show, and we touch on a lot of things there with John Van Wyck and Brian Worsham. I'm there every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. There every Monday through Friday. And, of course, we're still on prime time, baby. We've got Oscar's got us on Comcast TV 397, or if you got your rabbit ears out, TV 38. And next week, we've got...
the only analog. But anyway, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, whatever. However that works. It's far too complex for my brain. Hey, but next week, we're going to be talking the Senate race again, and we're going to have in the studio our former Congressman Pete Hoekstra will be with us to give his information. And we've had a very, very interesting event in that race. So it ought to be an exciting and interesting show. Things may happen between now and then also. So listen to us on the web. Go to eyeonmuskegon.com. Go to muskegonpundit.com. Look at a lot of the show prep. And we will see you next week on our little piece of heaven. Next week, folks, we'll put the eye on you, Muskegon.
Love me sometime.
What you want, what you want, what you gonna do when Sheriff John Brown come for you?
Call Bad Boys Bail Bonds. Open 24/7, 365 days a year. Agents statewide and nationwide. We do 10% bonds for less. Call toll free 866-728-6400. And remember, if we can't get you out, you ain't getting out. Payment plans available. Call now 866-728-6400. 6400. Classic Computer Sales and Service. They buy, sell, trade, repair, and upgrade. New custom-built computers, 3-year guarantee, excludes laptops. Or your computer tuned up with more memory, hard drive, or maybe a DVD burner installed for $49.95. Need cables, power supply, or get the computer built the way you want it? You can do it at Classic Computer in their new location, 1921 Apple Avenue, Suite B. Call 773-5957. Classic Computer with hometown quality service.
I'm running for Circuit Court Judge in the 14th Circuit for the state of Michigan. In my 35 years of practicing law, I have had the luxury of practicing in almost all areas of the law, including personal injury, labor, construction, negligence, malpractice, real estate, divorce, contracts, insurance, zoning, criminal, many areas of the law. If I'm elected circuit court judge, it is unlikely that I will encounter much of any issue as a judge that I have not already encountered and have experience with as an attorney practicing law. The uniqueness has to do with the breadth and scope of my practice and experience that I've had over the years. Much of it in circuit court, but also in other venues as well as in judicial venues.
Paid for by the committee to elect David Wells for Circuit Court Judge.